How do you tell a story that is beyond description? One that begins with man at his very worst, only to see a select few rise up and show him at his very best, whose dignity and honor never dimmed in the face of prejudice, whose stature is irrelevant due to enormous courage, whose impossible accomplishments are celebrated in far reaches of the world, yet most in their own country have no idea who they are. This is the story of the Nisei soldier of World War II, a true American hero.
And today, at long last, we award the Congressional Gold Medal to a group of Americans who are as deserving of it as any I have ever known.
The Congressional Gold Medal is Congress's highest honor, given only to those who achieved greatness for the betterment of this country. On November 2nd, 2011, a group of Japanese Americans received theirs, 70 years after their amazing story began. Nisei, a Japanese term that means second generation. If you are Nisei, that means you were born in the U.S. to parents who immigrated from Japan. You are American. But during World War II, that didn't matter. After Pearl Harbor, people of Japanese descent in the U.S. were labeled enemy aliens and forced into internment camps. Most lost everything.
It's like somebody taking a knife and cutting your heart out. You fight for the rest of your life trying to get it back.
But out of that unfairness came something remarkable.
We came out from behind barbed wire fences to prove to the United States government that we were Americans.
Many young men in the camps wanted to prove their loyalty to the United States. Eventually, they were given the chance. The Army created a segregated unit. They combined the men from the internment camps with men from Hawaii, all of Japanese descent. They would be known as the 100th 442nd MIS, and by the end of the war would become the most decorated unit in U.S. military history. But more importantly, they changed the world. Their impact still resonates today. Each year in this picturesque French town of Brières, there is a celebration. Every October, its citizens gather together and honor the 100th 442nd. The Japanese American soldiers liberated them from the Nazis. The battle for Brières took several days of bloody fighting. As you can see in this historic footage, it spilled over from the hills above the town to the streets and buildings in it. The Nisei soldiers were victorious, but it cost them many lives. Residents here say they will never forget the sacrifice. So here they are, saying thank you.
C'est le 442e.
Mayor Alain Blangy says the 442 fought hard to liberate Brières. It's important to say thank you. Without the 442nd, Brières would not be free. It's not hard to imagine what this town was like in 1944. Its beauty and charm have changed very little.
We are here. Telegraph.
The mayor shows me pictures from then.
It says telegraph in this old photo from the 442 because we are standing right now underneath that word. If you could look up here on the wall, you see it says telegraph.
It's the same throughout the town. Buildings and locations that are still here. The old photos are filled with Nisei soldiers moving through town, fighting to give new life to a place that was dark and frightening under Nazi control. And just as the buildings have not changed, many of the people haven't either. They're still here and remember.
Hello, Mr. Kononika.
86-year-old Edward Kononika was a 19-year-old fighting with the French resistance. His job was to escort a small unit of the 442 through the forest and into Brières. He says he remembers he was surprised at how small the Japanese Americans were, but brave. He says their faces were fearless. They were not afraid of the Germans. Madame Huguette Deloy says she remembers the battle. She was 20 at the time and says the Nazis were fighting the Americans from her front yard. She was scared to death. 84-year-old Fernand Didier was only 17 at the time, just a kid, fighting with the French resistance. He helped the 442 with intelligence so they could launch their attack.
442. 442.
To this day, he wants to thank them for allowing him to play a hand in liberating his home. Bernard George lives in this French countryside and knows every inch of these forests. It's hard to believe this beautiful place was once killing fields. The battle raged in every direction, and there are still pieces of evidence out there.
Oui, ça c'est une tache de sang qui est d'époque.
George has devoted his life to collecting it and telling the story of the 442 through what he has found.
So he just told me that this helmet belongs to a 442 soldier that was killed in battle. You could see the damage in the helmet. The soldier hit a landmine and was basically blown up. And the reason we know this is because his friends, his neighbors found this on their farm. They were living at the farm at the time and remember when the soldier was killed.
C'est une passion qui vient depuis.
He says it's his way of showing the world the sacrifices the Nisei soldiers made here. His way of making sure they are not forgotten. After Brières, there was no rest. Within days, the 442nd would find themselves back in the forest in an epic fight that will be labeled one of the greatest battles in U.S. history. A battalion of Texans were surrounded. The Nisei had to get them out. It will forever be known as the rescue of the Lost Battalion.
This is exactly where the Lost Battalion was dug in, up and down this hillside, and these foxholes are still here. This is a pretty good size one. They were digging in them for 5 days, so they were substantial. And you could see, if you look around, you could see the terrain that they were dealing with, the thick forest, the hillside. And they used this to protect themselves from the Nazis who had them surrounded.
Those foxholes helped the Texans fight off the Germans. It was an agonizing 5 days.
We were getting real low on food, medical supplies, and ammunition. And the first thing they did, they tried to shoot some chocolate D-bars into us. Right away they got on the radio and come back and stopped that because we took some casualties from that hard chocolate.
At the same time, the Nisei soldiers were suffering enormous casualties. The fighting was fierce, but they broke the German lines, and this famous newsreel was taken just moments after the rescue. The Texans, forever grateful for a second chance at life.
And they saved my dad's life.
And no one understands that more than Anthony Agnoni from Redondo Beach.
This is my dad, Anthony Agnoni's Eisenhower jacket.
His father, who has since passed away, was rescued that fateful day, allowing him to come home, have children, including Anthony.
If it weren't for the 442, Dad would have never come home and had a happy life, and I wouldn't be here.
I met Anthony at a memorial for the fallen members of the 10442nd. He was carrying his father's uniform, still saying thank you to the soldiers who gave their lives so that his father could live his.
I think that every single one of them should be honored. It's long overdue.
This beautiful yet heartbreaking place is in the foothills of the Vosges Mountains. It contains thousands of America's fallen from World War II, soldiers who will never come home. Among them, Japanese Americans who, despite prejudice and ill treatment, bravely fought for their country and for the liberation of France. Now and forever, the adopted sons of this beautiful place.